federal court rules that women are now allowed to walk around topless. Is this a modesty violation? Join us now as we unbutton this hot topic. Welcome back. Part 2 of the Faith and Whatever podcast, continuing on episode 58. That was my stomach, because I have not ate all day. All right, so for this religion topic, we are discussing boobs.
That's right.
Just put them out there.
Just putting it out there. So, United States federal court rules that females are free to display their breastises in public. All right, Garrett, what do you think?
Here's your 10-foot pole.
Right. So the idea is that because some people or males or groups of
Stop
population,
dodging the question, Garrett.
No, I'm leaving this in because I think it's a sexualized body part. That doesn't mean that all women have to have laws against that. So there are not necessarily national laws that I know of, but city laws and municipalities that women can't expose themselves, their chest area, but men can, and so women are claiming that's sexist and unfair.
And to be fair to the argument, not only can men expose their top selves, but for women that is a sexual part of the body, right? A good-looking guy with his shirt off can be very sexual, right?
Oh. Sure, but any part could. To any group of
but I mean, the torso has always been like one of the primary sexual, like visually sexual parts of the male body, right?
I don't walk around with my shirt off. Don't want to make other people stumble.
To claim that it is not a sexual body part and never has been is silly.
Right.
And
as far back to the Greeks, it was. The Greeks always idolized the male body in that way.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm not including every single population or culture.
Well, you should be.
But in America, at least. Yeah. So that's not, and I'm not sure they're claiming that. I don't know if women are claiming that because, it's a sexualized body part.
Well, what's good for one is good for the other is sort of part of the argument. Right?
Yeah, and they're saying we shouldn't have laws regarding what some people think about some body parts. We should have laws that are fair regardless of gender. So the question that kind of comes up from a Christian perspective is, where's modesty within that? Because to be honest, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me to not have...
Intellectually, it makes sense.
Yeah, to not have any laws that discriminate based on gender, of something someone can do or someone can't do based on their gender.
But then you take your kids to the park, and you're like, well, that's the result of that law.
Also,
right?
to be fair, I'm not gonna take my kids to the park if there's a topless guy walking around either, especially if he's at the park.
Well, no. I mean, that's a funny joke, but you see...
No, I'm dead serious.
No, you see like runners all the time. There's always topless male runners running all around the town and cities.
Yeah, it's weird and creepy.
Well, but it's also...
Stretching by the slide.
It's also promulgated. It's out there. It's permeated.
And the backdrop behind this is that it was actually illegal in America for men to be topless as well up until the early part of the 20th century in the 20s and 30s, right?
Ah.
And so this became a thing that males could go... I'm talking specifically at beaches. So neither males nor females in the first part of the 20th century could be topless. And so there is...
they wore like beach pajamas. That's what they kind of look like.
Also known as death suits. Especially in the waves.
It's like, okay.
Yeah, you were trying to swim in pure cotton.
And so...
Put on your swimming robe.
This is...
Made of wool.
This is something that we've been... Okay. So this has been something that we've kind of...
You got Bill Nye on that.
Gotten over for males in this culture. And so it's interesting. When I was in Australia, we were doing some work down there, and this was about 10 years ago.
I was on a Barbie.
And... skip.
Shrimp on a Barbie.
Yeah. But there was a woman that we were there with who was Australian, who was kind of part of like the host team or whatever, the church that received us, and she had a newborn at the time, and so we were driving to a certain place, and she started breastfeeding there, and this was the first time I had ever seen that happen there, and so I was talking to
so freely in public.
Yeah, and it was it wasn't a big deal. Nobody thought of it as anything else, and I remember it was 4 15-year-old guys all in the car from Orange County, right? And so we've never seen this before, so we all got dead silent there because nobody wanted to say anything. Nobody wanted to be the first one to like, I don't know. We didn't know what to do, and so we didn't want to do anything, right? And so, but this was the first exposure.
It's like the opposite of an icebreaker,
right? It's
an ice cuber.
Yeah. And so this was an interesting pardon the pun, but this was an interesting exposure for me to the idea of different cultural expectations and inculcations nonetheless.
Yeah.
And
That sounds like a made-up word.
I don't know what that means. Why would you use that word?
In calculations.
Inculcation. All right, $3 words on Faith and Whatever.
Look it up.
So the idea, like, these are very culturally specific, and that's what we have to be aware of. Like, we have a bias that has shaped us for sure in this discussion.
Yeah.
And so being able to
Puritanism has shaped us quite a bit.
yeah, and that to me is the biggest conundrum in all of this.
In
Puritanism
America,
sucks.
damage.
Yeah.
Yeah, we put a man on the moon, so obviously it works.
Like change anything.
So I like your bringing up of this in terms of how it relates to kind of a biblical decorum.
What is Christian modesty in any culture, right? And I think the quick answer might be to, well, what does the Bible say? And when you actually pay attention to the Bible, it's not quite as
Nothing.
clear as you think.
One piece only bathing suit.
Stop wearing your braids.
No, the Bible.
No spaghetti straps, girls.
The Bible.
Make
you
sure
can
you shave before you get to school.
I got Bill Nye.
By all three of us, actually. That was a really good, good teamwork.
The Bible repeatedly presses for, using different language, presses for there to be some form of modesty. But you'd be surprised when you actually try to define it. It's saying be modest, but it's kind of leaving the reader up to know what modesty is.
Right.
Like, it doesn't say, like, go to the New Testament, try to find a command where it says, like, don't be nude in public. Like, that's you're not going to get. You might get, don't be adulterous or don't be sexually provocative, whatever. But when it comes down to, like, the practical, what exactly is immodest in the New Testament, there's rarely clear definitions. It seems to assume that you understand it. And what it really is assuming is what's immodest in your culture.
Right.
Give you an example where it does get really practical, but not in the way you're thinking. Is there's two kinds of immodesty that's brought up repeatedly in the Bible. One we won't really talk about, which is gaudiness, right? Wearing a lot of really expensive looking jewelry or whatever you want to define that.
Yeah, it's a tough one for me.
Right. But the other one, I'll use 1 Corinthians chapter 11 verses 2 through 6. It talks about a couple of things, but one of the things it mentions the author, which is Paul, commends the Corinthian women for covering their hair during worship. And so when it's talking about modesty in worship, the thing Paul is concerned about is not covering this, but covering that.
For those of you who are listening on the podcast and could not see what James did, he went neck down for this, which for his neck, beard, and down, and then head up for that. There. Continue.
For the scores of people.
Dude, that's actually our most listened to source.
Okay, I take it back. I love you guys.
When it's being
so the idea is
hosted.
like when Paul is talking about modesty at worship,
Shut up, Garrett.
he is super concerned about the women's hair.
Idiot.
Because that, by the way, was a very, if you walked around Corinth in the first century, you know what you would see? All kinds of nude bodies. Nude, either like directly nude, but even if they're wearing togas.
Statues, too.
No. If they're wearing togas, I mean, real ancient togas are like thin sheets. There's no underwear. There's no bra situation. There's just you go walking in the wind wearing a thin sheet and tell me how covered you feel.
It's hot there.
I did that once. I'm not allowed back at that Chuck E. Cheese.
which means there was not much of a taboo about human nudity, but for some reason in this culture there was some taboo about the women's hair.
Do we know more about that? Do we know what exactly he was referring to?
Women's hair.
Like
oftentimes, if you wore your hair down,
too
it meant you were a
fancy,
prostitute or sexually
too
active.
braided.
No, the hair itself being exposed.
Oh, just the hair
Just being down.
Yeah. Now, this passage does end up having an influence upon later Christianity. If you ever went to a conservative Baptist church, especially one of like the last century, the women always wore hats to church or would somehow do up their hair and cover it.
Does this have anything to do with our Amish brethren?
Probably.
Does this have any impact on the Amish women?
Oh, and of course, modesty is, but again, the way they rightly recognize that the Bible presses modesty, but they interpret it through what was modesty of the 19th century, right? And then what's modesty of the 19th century? Exactly how an Amish person dresses. So there is an appeal, there is a command for modesty, but it seems to be often left up to the culture to define what is problematic.
So does the Christian value always align with the cultural expectation of modesty? I mean, is that the Christian response? Whatever is is modest in the culture in which you reside or live or interact is the more Christian thing to do?
I would say the basic thing. I think, the thing is define modesty. I find that modesty is defined in a group, right? It's not about what offends a person individually, but what offends the group for the most part, in defining modesty. And so what you do see in the Bible is especially from Paul, is a concern that you do not offend people around you and thus put a stumbling block for the gospel to be spoken.
Right.
So I think Paul, even though he doesn't spell it out so much, but I think you see implied in what he says a concern for the culture around you.
And I think what you're saying is there's not an answer to your question that can be given as far as a blanket statement goes, right? That we can really assess as Christians, because the conversation can't start at the same point because each culture has a different beginning point for.
Yeah, but it sounds like that a Christian there's a Christian response to this new bill that's being passed, and that is that it's not modest, because there's a huge chunk of a population who would say that.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And it gets complicated at this point.
So one of the reasons that this is applicable for me is right now my wife is breastfeeding, and within the in-laws
at this very second.
Probably, I don't know. Within the in-laws, like there's a difference, right? So in my family,
now I have a male friend who can lactate, so should he not be allowed to breastfeed?
Wow. Okay.
All right.
That's a whole other
within our own
Getting
families.
into the weeds.
So in my family, most of the women breastfed,
James.
and then when you're at home, you're not super concerned about like wearing a covering, like
Right.
even around the younger kids and the kids and everybody. In my wife's family, none of the women breastfed for choice or for whatever reason, and so she goes over there and she kind of
Hides almost.
Use the blanket.
Yeah, use the blanket for sure. But she's a fairly modest person, but she kind of laughs like, this is kind of silly. Like, this is hard
Did
to
you
do.
say fairly immodest or fairly modest?
Fairly
person?
modest.
Okay. I was like, man.
But
she's like, this is frustrating. She's like, I'm just trying to feed my baby, and this is hard that I have to like cover myself around my own family.
I find being sensitive to other people's touchy subjects is always like seems silly. Like that when I have to limit myself in some way in some other household to fit what they consider appropriate, I almost immediately have that same feeling. This is kind of a little silly because it isn't important to me.
Right, but one of the I think the deeper issue though is the way that we have potentially, and I would argue, kind of hypersexualized breasts in general there. And so I think if we're going to have a conversation about modesty, we should probably move it back a little bit before even the conversation of exposure in public or not goes, right? We should be talking about the way that we have very much generalized that as a culture. And so for me, that probably starts more as a conversation that we have amongst men and young men, kind of the next generation coming behind, saying like,
they look awesome, but they're not.
I mean, no, not like that at all. But to say like, right, the main purpose of I guess the dual purpose is to be erogenous, and those things are great within the context of marriage and those things are good. But however, the main purpose that they serve from, biology standpoint, evolutionary standpoint, whatever it is, the idea is to be able to provide sustenance and nourishment for the life coming behind. And so we have to be able to balance that. And the only way that I know to do something like that is through exposure and immersement into that type of living.
The way something becomes taboo is it gets hidden first.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Things are only taboo when they're first hidden, and they become not taboo when they become exposed for the whole general public.
Yeah. And so to me, the onus is not on women in this discussion. For me, the onus is on teachers of scripture or whatever to teach the proper view of how to understand the female body in its entirety. And typically, I don't know that can best come from the voice of a male, right? It seems to me that it's something that comes better from...
So it's a good thing we got four guys here to talk about.
Yes.
Well, we got to analyze what we've got to analyze. And so, but I think by the helpful part that we do get to do as males is by admitting that in terms of being able to perpetuate this stereotype in a way that becomes like positive, I guess. Like I shouldn't say that. Moving away from the stereotype in general and replacing it with a more positive narrative to the idea.
Well, just the idea that it's their body and it's their ability to do what they want. The fact that I'm offended or someone else is shouldn't mean that we should create laws.
Right, and so that's my big contingency. Like, I've seen the trouble and the frustration that women go through to like, and it's just like, yeah, I mean, if that does make me uncomfortable because of the way I raised, I can
holding
leave
a baby
the room,
to his nipple,
right? Like I should leave.
There's
not
even
the person
another
who needs to
complication.
feed.
Even if we for a second just took the opposite perspective that it's immodest according to Christian ethics, I don't necessarily believe that, but let's do that for a moment. Let's take that mindset.
Wrong.
The American government doesn't need to be designed on Christian modesty.
Yeah.
In fact, it's, as we've talked about in the past, it's always better for Christianity to not be the dominant culture, to let the culture
crusades.
Yeah, right. let American culture be American culture, and if we're going to say, well, that's not Christian modesty, well, let's do that in the privacy of our own Christianity,
right.
As opposed to trying to force law.
Can we just ban babies from public? I mean, really, they're not helping anything.
If it offends you, I guess we should create a law.
They're noisy and they smell bad.
Oh man, my baby smells.
Generally not likable.
Yeah, you can't talk to
Super
them.
selfish.
Yeah.
All right, I miss my daughter. I'm going home.
So, final thoughts: yay or nay?
Yeah, it's good. I'm just wondering the day that I take my kids to the beach day and there's a bunch of topless women around. Well, not my kids, my youth group kids. I have my kids, but they're all girls.
So go, or you could be a youth minister in France.
Yeah, I just wonder, just not that would be awful, but just that interesting detail.
I would love to do that because then I don't have to start the conversation, right? Then the conversation automatically starts and then I can answer.
Hey, Aiden, how come you don't want to get up and go swimming? I'll just sit right here.
Here's a point that I think was made to me that on a related
Garrett
topic.
was fired that day.
on a related topic, and I find to be very
safe.
important here. Very important. We're talking about kids, right? Your kids are going to be exposed to literally everything. Anything you can think of, your kids will be exposed to it sooner or later. Is it not more valuable for them to have you be the teacher of those things as opposed to just accidentally coming across
having a response to it as opposed to an unplanned experience?
Even the very embarrassing things like the exact functions of sex, which are very embarrassing to talk about with your kids. But you know what?
That's the whole reason I'm not having kids.
They're going to learn all about that.
Because no one talked to you or someone did talk to you?
I don't want to.
Yes, and yes.
And it would be better for them to be able to have a friend and a partner in learning with their parents instead of somebody who feels what's the word I'm looking for? Estranged in that conversation. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, well, there you go, America. We just closed the case on
and open the shirts.
So, like video, share video, subscribe to channel there. Let us know what you think in the comments below, because we know we're right on this one. So take it or leave it. Yeah, thanks for much.
But take it though.
Thanks for stopping by. I'm awesome. Thanks so much for watching our video. If you want to keep watching more excellent Faith in Whatever videos, you can look right here. If you want to subscribe to our page, you can click right here. And also, we have a link to our Patreon. We would love for you to go over to that site and be part of the excellent and awesome community that we're building there. Thanks so much for stopping by.